At 2:17 a.m., something breaks. A $100 trillion global economy starts slowing down. Not with an explosion, not with a warning, just silence. A tanker stops, then another, then another. Within hours, over 200 oil tankers freeze in place. Not because they can't move, but because suddenly it's too dangerous to try. And here's what makes this insane. Each of those ships is carrying up to 2 million barrels of oil. Some powering entire countries, others worth over $100 million. And now, they're just sitting there. Engines off, radar scanning, crews waiting. Because somewhere below them could be a mine, and somewhere above, a drone. And all of this was triggered by a stretch of water just 21 miles wide.
This is the Strait of Hormuz. Every single day, around 20 million barrels of oil pass through here. That's 1 out of every 5 barrels on Earth. And it's not just oil. Around 20% of global gas flows through this same corridor, and nearly half of the world's most common fertilizer, not just energy, food. Now zoom in. At its narrowest point, this entire system compresses into just 2 miles in, 2 miles out, a 2-mile buffer in between. And because of the way maritime law works, tankers move through in single-file convoys, no room to dodge, no room to turn, a corridor you could walk across in 30 minutes, carrying a $100 trillion economy, one file at a time. And here's the problem, there is no backup. Saudi Arabia's pipelines can move maybe 5 million barrels, the UAE another 700,000, together less than a third of the daily flow. And for Qatar's liquefied natural gas, zero, not less than half, zero. There is no pipeline, no alternative terminal, no other route. So when this stops, the world doesn't reroute, it stalls.
Quick break. If you want to stay ahead in unpredictable markets, meet the Alchemist. It's a plug-and-play trading system for MetaTrader 4, running fully automated, scanning markets 24/7 for high-probability setups. You stay in control, your broker, your capital, your risk, while the system executes without emotion. Click the link in the description, use code HORMUZ10 for 10% off, because what happens next is where the system starts breaking. And here's where it gets dangerous. You don't need a navy to shut this down. You just need uncertainty. Take a Shahed drone. It costs somewhere between $4,000 and $20,000 to build. The Patriot interceptor missile used to shoot it down, $4 million. That's a 1 to 200 cost exchange. Iran doesn't have to win the battle, they just have to keep firing until America runs out of missiles. And then there are the mines. Iran has between 2,000 and 6,000 naval mines. Not a handful, thousands. Smart influence mines that detonate on the acoustic signature, the magnetic field, the pressure wave of a passing ship. But here's what most people miss. You don't even need to hit anything. You just need to make the risk unpredictable. Because once even one mine is confirmed, every ship after that becomes a gamble. And global trade doesn't tolerate gambling. Here's the mechanism: war risk insurance. Normally, less than 1/4% of a ship's value. During this crisis, it jumped 12 times within 72 hours. And here's the number nobody talks about. A Suezmax tanker's war risk premium reached $7.5 million. The actual freight it was carrying, $6.5 million. The insurance cost more than the cargo. Shipping companies don't wait for certainty, they react to fear, and fear spreads faster than facts. And suddenly, it's not a blockade, it's paralysis. Because global shipping doesn't run on oil, it runs on confidence. And the moment confidence disappears, everything freezes. Not destroyed, not attacked, frozen. This has happened before. From 1980 to 1988, Iran and Iraq attacked hundreds of merchant ships in these same waters. Over 100 sailors died. That war lasted 8 years.
And then
Everything reacts fast. Within hours, prices jump. Within days, oil pushes toward $90. Within weeks, it surges past $120. By mid-March 2026, Brent crude hit $126 a barrel, the largest monthly oil price increase in recorded history. Now think about that. A 50% increase in oil is like doubling the cost of moving everything. Charter rates from the Gulf to Asia went from $100,000 to $150,000 a day to over $424,000 a day. Shipping spikes, factories slow, trade strains. Because the system is connected, energy to transport to trade to everything. And then central banks get trapped. Raise rates, you crush growth. Lower them, inflation explodes. No good move. Every 10% rise in energy adds roughly 0.4% global inflation. Now imagine 50. The IMF cut global growth forecasts. Oxford economics modelling put growth at just 0.6%, the lowest since the COVID-19 pandemic. This isn't a price spike, it's a system shock. But here's where it gets worse. This isn't just an oil story, it's a food story. Nearly half of the world's most common fertilizer, urea, moves through this same corridor. And it's not just urea, ammonia, sulfur, half of the world's seaborne sulfur, the raw material used to make phosphate fertilizer, passes through the Strait of Hormuz. And here's the hidden delay. This doesn't hit immediately, it hits later. Within weeks of the 2026 closure, urea prices jumped from $400 a metric ton to $700, a 75% spike in 1 month. Farmers respond instantly. They cut usage. Less fertilizer means lower yields. Lower yields means less food. But here's where it compounds. Lower food supply meets higher transport costs at the same time. So now, food is harder to produce and more expensive to move. Double pressure. Within months, prices start rising. Within a year, shortages begin. Countries across Asia, Africa, Latin America start feeling it first, not as headlines, but as empty shelves. 318 million people. That's roughly the entire population of the United States. The FAO and World Food Program project that number, facing acute hunger from this single disruption. And by the time developed economies feel it, it's already too late to fix. Because agriculture doesn't reset overnight. You miss one planting cycle, you lose an entire year's harvest. And that's how a 21-mile waterway turns into a global food crisis. So what is the Strait of Hormuz, really? It's not just a trade route, it's a single point of failure for the modern world. A system where 20% of oil, 20% of gas, half the world's seaborne sulfur, and 318 million people's food security all depend on a corridor you could cross in under 30 minutes. And here's something nobody is talking about. Even after a ceasefire, even after the war ends, the strait may not reopen. Because clearing thousands of untracked smart mines from a 21-mile waterway takes months. The US military's dedicated minesweepers were decommissioned before this crisis began. The war ends, but the mines don't disappear. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The world didn't build resilience, it built efficiency, which works perfectly until something breaks. For decades, this waterway stayed open, not because it was safe, not because it was protected, but because everyone believed it would be. A global assumption, a fragile agreement that this would never break. But in 2026, that illusion collapsed. We built a $100 trillion global economy on a 21-mile assumption. And when that assumption broke, everything followed. And when it does, it doesn't fail slowly. Because the Strait of Hormuz isn't just a choke point. It's a switch. And now we know it can be turned off.